Okay. Good evening, everyone. So we are starting today's session. It's just about a few minutes past 5 p.m. We had a very exciting session yesterday, and today promises to be another exciting day. I'll be taking you through as the MC for today's sessions, and it is my great pleasure. Prof. Masharia says people may not know who I am, so here I am. So my name is Dr. Shahin Syed. I'm a pathologist. I'm based here at the Aga Khan University Hospital Department of Pathology, and I'm also the vice chair of the organizing committee for this scientific for this meeting. So without much further ado, may I please call upon Professor Masharia to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, Shaheen. Those who wrote the program should be knowing my name because I was named. I'm the chair of the organizing committee. You are with most of you, I expect yesterday. And we are hoping that today you have double the number we had yesterday, a very interesting session. Today marks the second and the last day of this conference. And mine is just to come you and I hope you enjoy and to stay up to the end because as you know, we've got a panel discussion at the end and we've also got a number of goodies. So I'm sure people will be keen to see who ends up getting the few prizes that we have, which are pretty attractive. Thank you very much and enjoy the afternoon. Thanks.
So thank you very much. So we will start off with the first session. We have two presentations. The theme of this session is non-communicable diseases, and our session chair will be Prof. Nancy Kunia. She is currently the chair of the Department of Internal Medicine, as well as a practicing endocrinologist. Welcome, Nancy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here to introduce our first speakers this evening. I'm in diabetes and endocrinology, and it's a pleasure to introduce our first topic, overweight and obesity and perceptions of body image among female sex workers in Mombasa, Kenya. And this will be presented by Caroline Gishoki from Aga Khan University. So I'll ask if you have any questions, you could send them in as we go along, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the two presenters. Thank you and welcome, Caroline.
Thank you, Prof. Nancy. My name is Caroline Bishoki from the Department of Population Health, and today I will present to you overweight and obesity and perceptions of body image among female sex workers in Mombasa, Kenya. Okay. So overweight and obesity rates are rising among in sub-Saharan Africa among urban women at a rate of 5% per year on average. And of course, this comes with associated health risks such as cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, arthritis, and even negative maternal outcomes. And several studies have been done to assess the women's nutritional status in sub-Saharan Africa, but no studies have been done focusing specifically on female sex workers as a vulnerable subpopulation. On body image, studies also show that culture influences how women assess their body image and body weight. And several studies in Africa suggest that being overweight is a socially desirable body size and is associated with prosperity, with happiness, with wealth. And one study that was actually done here in Nairobi slum area revealed that women desired a larger body size, and a substantial population of women indicated a desire to have a body image that is larger than their actual body image. And half of those who are overweight and obese chose an ideal body image that was also overweight and obese. And of course, this is an obstacle in tackling these rising cases of overweight and obesity, but it also informs those who develop these interventions. And again, no studies have been done to assess what is the ideal body image among female sex workers. And I said these are people who use their body for economical factors. And so for this study, we chose to assess the prevalence of overweight and obesity among female sex workers in Mombasa, Kenya, and also evaluate their perceptions of body image, and also to assess the factors associated with overweight and obesity among these female sex workers. This was part of a larger cluster randomized controlled trial that was done in Mombasa between September 2016 and May 2017. 882 female sex workers aged between 16 to 34 who were not pregnant and who had done transactional sex in the last 6 months were recruited from randomly selected sex work venues and enrolled into this study. And for these findings, we did secondary analysis of the baseline cross-sectional data. And so for outcomes of interest, we measured their weight and their height and calculated their BMI. And we also asked them questions on social demographic and behavioral characteristics. We also did some clinical assessments to see if they were anemic. And for body image, using these charts that has 18 images of women who have different sizes, 1 to 5 is considered overweight, underweight, 6 through 9 is normal weight, 10 through 13 is overweight, and 14 through 18, those are considered obese women. And so using this chart, we asked the female sex workers to identify what their perception was of their current body image. And we also asked them to identify an image that depicted what their desired body image was. And for analysis, we did descriptive analysis of BMI and the current and desired body image data. And we did a bivariate and multivariate logistic regression to assess correlates of overweight and obesity. And this study was approved by the listed bodies. And so for our results, for BMI, as you can see, 8.4% were underweight, 49.8% were normal, 25 had a normal BMI, 25.6% had an overweight BMI, and 16.2% had an obese BMI. About 41.8% had a BMI above 25. And for the results of the body image, what we did was to compare their answers to their actual body, to their actual BMI. And so, for example, in the first chart, these were the results of the perceived current body size. And you can see those who had an underweight BMI, those who had an underweight BMI, 98% of them perceived to have an underweight body image. Those who are normal, around 59%, perceive themselves to have, about 59% of them perceive themselves to be underweight, and about 39% of those who had a normal BMI perceive themselves to have a body image that was normal. And of course, for those we were looking at, those who are overweight and obese, you can see among those who are overweight, about 61% of them perceive themselves to have a normal body size. And among those who are obese, about 20% Among those who are obese, about 49% of them thought themselves as overweight, and 30% thought themselves to have a normal BMI. Thank you. And also we did the same for the desired body size, and we compared what they desired to their actual BMI. And as you can see, those who are underweight, about 50% desired an underweight body image. Among those who are normal, 60% desired a normal image. And among those who are overweight and obese, as you can see, a majority of them desire to have a normal body size. And for, these are more results, as you can see. We assessed age, education, religion, number of pregnancies, HB, and the number of times they have takeaway meals from outside their homes. And for age, those who are 31 to 34 years of age were more likely to be obese as compared to those who are 16 to 20. They have higher odds of being obese. And for those who had 2 or more pregnancies, they were also more likely to be obese as compared to those who did not have any pregnancies. And these 2 results, even after adjusting for the independent variables, they were significant. Something else that was interesting was that for HB, those who had a higher HB were more likely to be overweight and obese as compared to those who had a lower HB. Variables such as education, religion, and takeaway meals were not significantly, were not statistically significant for our results. A substantial proportion of female sex workers are overweight and obese, and a large percentage underestimated their body size, which suggests that they do not acknowledge their weight or their related health risk. However, positively, more than half of those who are overweight and obese expressed a desire to reduce their weight to normal weight, or for some even underweight. And the characteristics that were significantly associated with overweight and obesity were age, number of pregnancies, and HB levels. And so my conclusion is there's a high prevalence of overweight and obesity among female sex workers, and we should develop targeted interventions to address this challenge among these female sex workers, and with special focus on increasing age and those who have multiple pregnancies. Study limitations were for our height and weight, they were measured by a clinician, and so we expected random measurement error. And of course, the age range, we did not cover older female sex workers. And this kind of design is of course uncertainty for cross-sectional study design, is uncertainty on causality. You're not able to know which comes first, the predictors or the outcome. These are my references, and I'd like to acknowledge some of these people who made it possible to conduct this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for an interesting study, and well done on keeping excellent time. We will ask that your questions are sent in through the chat box, and we will do our Q&A after the second presentation, which is ready now. So our second presentation is on the risk factors of type 2 diabetes in Nairobi, Kenya, a comparative cross-sectional study, which will be presented by Anthony Mushai Manyara of the University of Glasgow. So welcome.
So good evening, my name is Anthony Manyara. I'm a PhD student at the University of Glasgow, and I'll be presenting some of my PhD findings this evening. So type 2 diabetes is on the rise in sub-Saharan Africa, and the prevalence is expected to double by the year 2045 if preventive measures are not taken. It is a preventable disease, which you can target the modifiable risk factors such as weight, diet, and physical activity. And there is also emerging evidence that muscle strength, sleep, and early life environment could play a role in development of diabetes. As we think about preventing type 2 diabetes, it's important to note that Africans have a unique type 2 diabetes phenotype. They get diabetes at low body height and also at an early onset. Although the Kenyan diabetes prevention and control documents are well aligned to international documents, they are based on scant local evidence. And so this study aimed to generate local evidence and specifically to understand the etiology of type 2 diabetes in Black populations to inform preventive measures. So we conducted a comparative cross-sectional study, and we recruited 70 type 2 diabetes patients who I'll be calling cases in the course of this presentation. We matched them by age, sex, and socioeconomic status to 81 normoglycemic controls who I'll be referring to as controls in the course of the presentation. So we included people who are aged 35 to 64, who had lived in Nairobi for at least 5 years, and who had no health condition that would influence cardiometabolic health, such as HIV. Our cases were recent, so they had been diagnosed in the last 2 years. So we collected data using a questionnaire on socio-demographic characteristics and also lifestyle factors. And we did body composition measures, anthropometrics, and hand grip strength, which is a measure of muscle strength. We also issued accelerometers to be worn by participants for 7 days for objective measurement of physical activity. So I'll be presenting my data in tables and in means and standard deviations. So the first 2 columns are controls, disaggregated by sex, so women, men, and then there are cases, women, men, and then the p-value that I'll be referring to for significance is the first p-value, cases versus control. So a p-value less than 0.05 is significant. Then I have another p-value for women versus men, and the last p-value is an interaction between sex and study group. So from this table, we see that there were no differences in social demographic characteristics between cases and controls. However, a higher proportion of cases had a first degree relative with diabetes compared to controls, and that was significant. So on body composition and adiposity and strength, we found that the cases were shorter by over 2 centimeters in both sexes, and that was significant. Surprisingly, body fat percentage, body fat free mass, and BMI was not different between the 2 groups. Waist circumference was not different between the 2 groups, but it's important to note that in men, the cases had 7 centimeters higher waist circumference, and this will become important in a few seconds. Hip circumference was also not different between the 2 groups, but again, in women, important to note that the cases had 4 centimeters lower hip circumference compared to controls. Waist to height ratio was not significant. Now, waist to hip ratio, as I was mentioning, in sexes, there were differences in waist and hip. Now you see it was highly significant, meaning that the cases had a higher waist to hip ratio, and so they were more centrally obese than the controls. A higher proportion of cases of normal weight status were centrally obese. And for grip strength, we found that the cases had a lower strength compared to controls by about 3 kgs in women and by about 2 kgs in men. And that, again, was significant. Now, on diet, as expected, a higher proportion of cases had been advised by a health worker to change their diet, and they had heeded to this advice. So you can see the cases are taking in fewer meals from the vendor. They are taking fewer sugary drinks per week, and they are also taking more fruits and vegetables. However, if we categorize the fruit and veg categories into quantiles, we see that on the last row of that table, that despite the advice and the health education, only a quarter of the cases achieved the recommended 5 servings of fruit and veg. And I'll be coming back to that in the discussion. So physical activity, and this is data from the accelerometer, there was no difference between the cases and the controls. And men were more physically active than women. If you look at the last row on steps per day, men accumulated over 10,000 steps per day, and the women about 7,000 steps per day. Again, no differences between cases and controls. So what do these findings mean? One is the utility of family history. So family history needs to be used to identify those at increased risk of type 2 diabetes for intervention allocation. Two is that the cases did not have higher levels of fat, but instead they distributed their fats differently. So they had a higher central obesity. And other studies in sub-Saharan Africa, including one here in Nairobi, have shown that central obesity is a better predictor of type 2 diabetes than general obesity. And so general messages to lose weight will be less appropriate in this population. Instead, we may need to switch focus from BMI to measures of central obesity to identify those at an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Further, we may need to intervene to reduce weight in those who have high central obesity, even if they are of normal weight. Now, hand grip and height, is it causal, or are these just markers of early life environment? Why early life environment is because height is determined by genes, but it's also a product of growth phases. And hand grip strength is determined by hereditary body height, but also is a product of early life factors such as maternal and placental factors, exercise and nutrition during development. So it means that the low hand grip and the low height in our cases may be mediated by a common pathway. Now, in other populations, there is evidence that even small increments in hand grip strength may reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes in a clinically significant way. So data from a meta-analysis shows that 1 SD increase in grip strength reduces the risk by about 13%. And so interventions to increase muscle strength may also be appropriate for this population. Just to mention that the WHO released the new physical activity guidelines a few weeks ago, and one of the strong recommendations is engaging in muscle strengthening activities at least 2 days in a week for additional health benefits. Now, health education is working because we find the cases are having better dietary practices. However, there are still gaps in that because a quarter of them achieve the 5 daily recommended fruit and veg servings, which means that there is an opportunity to intervene on diet in high-risk groups through health education, but also there is a need to address barriers in uptake of healthy dietary practices, something which I'm doing using qualitative methods. Our data on diet is limited in that we didn't know the diet before diagnosis, and so we are not able to comment the extent of change in our cases after health education. And also, it may be prone to social desirability bias in that the cases may have reported what was expected of them rather than what they were practicing. So the strength of this study is that it used similar groups in social demographic characteristics to compare risk exposure. And also it adds to the scant available evidence of type 2 diabetes etiology in Kenya and in sub-Saharan Africa. However, a pragmatic, convenient sample limits the generalizability of the findings, and a cross-sectional design limits causal inferencing. In summary, is that type 2 diabetes is associated with a positive family history, a higher central obesity, a shorter height, and a lower grip strength. And that emphasizes the utility of family history and central obesity in both risk stratification and intervention development, and also a call for more evidence to determine if low height and muscle strength play a causal role or are just indicators of an adverse early life environment. I would want to acknowledge and thank the following institutions and individuals, and also wish the audience happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and for an excellent and very enjoyable presentation. I think I'll ask Caroline to please come down for any questions. There's a first question here from Lillian Karanja, directed to overweight and obesity. Caroline, what led to collecting data that included their HB interest? So the question is, what led to collecting data that included hemoglobin?
Okay, thank you for that question. As I told you, this was secondary analysis of a larger study that we conducted in Mombasa. And so the primary analysis was assessing the nutritional status, was assessing an NPL intervention and to see whether sending female sex workers messages on nutrition would have any impact. And so we did several clinical assessments, including HB and other measurements. And so for this specific study, for this specific paper, HB was one of our terms of interest. Yes, but this was part of a larger study where we've got so many other clinical assessments done, and HB was one of them.
So one more for you, Caroline. Would you share how you got consent for the females who are under 18 in your study?
Thank you. And so in Kenya, the legal age for providing consent was 16. And so we did not enroll anyone who was below 16. As you saw, our age limit was 16 to 34. And so, yeah, it was just normal consenting for anyone who was below 18, and that's 16 to 18.
Thank you very much. There's one for you, Manyara, here. It says, was your study designed as a matched case control study and sample size estimated for such? And your numbers appear rather small, and it is likely that you are underpowered to detect meaningful associations. Please comment.
So the first one.
Yes.
The
first one, was your study designed as a matched case control study and sample size estimated for such? As a matched case control study.
Yes, so this was a matched case control study. So it was one case for one control. We did, as I mentioned in my last slide, this was a pragmatic sample, and we hypothesized that a sample of 100 cases and 100 controls would enable us to detect 0.4 SD differences between the two groups. However, we were not able to get to 100 cases and 100 controls due to COVID, and so we stopped data collection when COVID started.
Okay, there was another question here about your numbers being rather small, and I think you mentioned it as one of the limitations of applicability. But the question is here, were you underpowered to detect meaningful associations?
Okay, I don't think we were underpowered to detect meaningful associations. Our calculations showed that we had an 80% power to detect 0.4 SD differences between the means of the two groups. So I would say we were not underpowered. Yeah.
One last question for Anthony. How did you estimate your sample size and controls?
Okay. So again, this was a pragmatic sample. So we, using G-power, we picked 100 cases and 100 controls, and we had 80% power to detect 0.4 SD differences between the means of the two groups. Yeah.
I was very interested about body fat measurement not correlating. Did you find that interesting, and should we remove it as one of the measures that nutritionists use from the study? The percentage body fat.
Yes, what it shows is that it's the distribution of fat and not the amount of fat. So if the fat is around the waist, then it's more clinically meaningful than if it's peripheral, for example, on the hips or on the muscles. So that one is less clinically significant, but the one that is around the waist is more clinically significant.
So thank you very much, because that is used by the nutritionists traditionally actually around the arm. So that's an interesting finding. So for Caroline, I think we have 2 more minutes. Why was your age inclusion limited to 34 years? Especially as age is shown to be a significant feature in obesity.
Definitely. Again, as I said, this was part of a larger study that was conducted with different main outcomes. And it was a cluster randomized control trial that had 2 arms. One arm was the nutritional arm, the other arm was a sexual reproductive health arm. And they were assessing the prevalence of unintended pregnancy among these female sex workers. And so previous studies had shown that unintended pregnancy was high among this age group. And so they decided to limit it to that age group because of that outcome. Yes. Yes, and I'll say this is a secondary analysis of
a larger
yes,
study.
that whose main outcomes are different from what's done today. Yes.
So another last comment for Carol here, and to think about what are some of the weight management interventions that would be feasible in this key population.
Thank you.
And what they looked at.
Thank you for that answer. First of all, I'll start with the last part. No, they were not looked at. But the good thing about female sex workers, they already have their own programs. I think the main interventions that mainly target female sex workers are on sexual and reproductive health. These are people who, in Mombasa especially, they have their own drop-in centers where they go to seek assistance for health. And so integrating nutritional interventions would be very easy. And these would include nutritional screening, nutritional education, and screening for non-communicable diseases per se, or lifestyle modification interventions, among others. Yes, but again, reaching to female sex workers would be easy because they have their own health seeking system.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask the audience who are here. Do you have a... Yes, Professor Shaheen.
Thank you very much to Anthony. A question about visceral fat, because that's what we have been told. You know, currently it's more the visceral fat. It's not your BMI. It's not even maybe the hip, the waist hip ratio may play a part when we are looking for parameters of obesity. Can you comment about visceral fat and how you measure, and whether that would be something to look into as well?
Okay, I would say the visceral fat, the central obesity measures are proxies of visceral fat. So because the visceral fat mainly is around the waist, so central obesity measures are the very simple ways you can measure visceral fat. But the other ways, for example, going to the lab and doing scans that can see how much fat you have. You can do, for example, a liver fat test, so to see how much fat you have around the liver. But for population level, I feel that central obesity measures are good enough to show you the visceral fats that you may have.
Anthony, as part of your study, did you look at anything to do with brown and white fat in terms of adiposity, or any comments?
No,
no difference in a type of fat, which is topical right now. So I think it's 5:35 now. And I want to thank our two presenters. I think we can give them a clap. And thank you very much, Anthony and Caroline, for engaging us in those excellent presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumia, for that excellent chairing of those excellent sessions. So it's my pleasure now to invite Professor Macharia to introduce our keynote speaker for today.
Thank you, Shaheen, for according me the privilege of introducing my friend and colleague, Dr. Omo Anzala. I will be careful not to preempt what he's going to talk about this evening, because he'll be talking about his life and his career as a physician researcher. For as long as I can recall, Professor Anzala, was always in the labs there doing stuff, and, over the years. And, I wasn't born yesterday. So you can imagine he has been at that game for a pretty long period of time. I would just like to highlight just a few things that, for orientation, that he is a professor in the Department of Virology and Immunology, in the Department of Medical Microbiology within the Kavi Institute of Clinical Research. And he has a host of qualifications. First of all, most important is that he's actually MBCHB, and is one of the not very many physicians who have moved to a different track and not pursued the private practice. And he's committed, a good proportion of his life in academics. This happened after he pursued his clinical, his diploma in epidemiology at Tufts University in the US, followed by a PhD in virology and epidemiology at University of Manitoba in Canada.
Okay,
Improved the weather there. I hope Bob is listening to me in Canada, where he's joining in. I hope the weather is good. So Professor Anzala is a leading HIV vaccine investigator. As a matter of fact, when anybody in this part of the world, not just in the country, but in most of Africa and even globally, there's nobody who can talk about HIV vaccine work without featuring the name of Anzala, thanks to his mentors, some of them who are late mentors, but he never let them down. He has outstandingly, he has been a principal investigator for the just completed phase 1 and phase 2 candidate Ebola vaccine trial, which were funded by Johnson & Johnson. And finally, before he comes in, without taking a lot of his time, is that he has trained many. He's in a number of committees in the Ministry of Health, the Vaccination Experts Committee, National Polio Expert Committee, National Vaccine Safety Advisory Committee, African Vaccine Manufacturing Initiative in South Africa, member of National COVID-19 Task Force, and a team leader of National COVID-19 case management. As a matter of fact, it's a big privilege to have him availing this time to us, because he's usually very difficult to corner, especially during these times of COVID, when his expertise is being sought right, left, and center. So most welcome, Professor Anzala, to make your presentation.
Yeah, I hope you guys can hear me, and thank you, Prof. It's a pleasure to meet the Aga Khan researchers and team. We worked with you, Prof, here before you moved to Aga Khan, but we are still in touch. Just to start off, I'm not going to have slides because I want to make this, very personal, just to give a sense of my journey and how I got into, where I am, and to also actually just say that it has been enjoyable, interesting, sometimes difficult, sometimes disappointing, but overall, my journey has been very nice to me. I should start by saying that I went to primary school in a very dry area, Magadi Primary School. Maybe some of you know it, very small. That's where my dad was working as an electrician. After finishing Magadi Primary School, I went to Alliance High School. I was there when Alliance was really Alliance, not the way it is now, overcrowded and looking very ugly. I did my 4 years, I went back, I did my high school, and then I joined University of Nairobi as a medical student. I used to be in Hall 3. So those of you who are in university and have been in Hall 3, then we share some commonality. Those who have been at Alliance High School, we also share some commonality. I was in Selwood House, one of the good houses. I also was a school captain when I left Alliance. So I have really had a good life. I joined the University of Nairobi. I finished as a medical doctor. I did my internship in Machakos, my 1 year, got registered. I was then posted to Eldoret to work as a medical officer. This now was towards the end of 88, 89. So I used to, then they posted me to Kapsabet. So I used to work in Kapsabet and Nandi Hills Hospital doing the things that medical officers do. But it was at this point that things changed. Those of you who have been in medical school can remember Professor Achola Ndinya, and those of you who have had a contact with Canadians can also remember the late Professor Frank Plummer. For one reason, Frank Plummer and Achola Ndinya came to Eldoret to give a continuing medical education, and they were talking about sexually transmitted infections. This was in 1989. I happened to be in the congregation, and interesting enough, that week I had actually seen a patient in Nandi Hills with a huge genital ulcer. I really couldn't make sense of what it was at that time. It looked, I wish I could show you the pictures, but I avoided that. It looked, really caseating. It looked, like cancerous, but not cancerous. But when they presented their presentation and they mentioned chancroid, Haemophilus ducrei, is when it occurred to me, wow, this is what it was. I'd never seen that in medical school. And during the discussion, then the interest started there. I talked to Achola a little bit. I talked to Frank Plummer, and they told me, oh, you can come and do research. I applied. I was taken to the Department of Medical Microbiology, and then got into the research they were doing, looking at STIs, looking at HIV, looking at chlamydia, looking at gonorrhea, and then I got a scholarship to go and do infectious diseases in Canada, but I took a break and did an epidemiology at Tufts University in Boston, and then headed to University of Manitoba to do infectious disease. I finished that, and then did my PhD, finished that. And then in 1997, 98, I headed to the University of Oxford in London to do my postdoc, to look at more details, virology and immunology. And that's when we developed our first vaccine with Oxford. And that was the creation of CAVI Institute of Clinical Research. But what I want to tease you guys is that people forget about STIs. STIs have not gone away. We are still looking at STIs now, and more so gonorrhea, because gonorrhea is becoming resistant to antimicrobials. That's a huge research area, ladies and gentlemen. Even now, there is money outside there of somebody who can develop a vaccine for gonorrhea and a vaccine for chlamydia. So as I talk this, I hope I'm giving you tips of research areas, that are still virgin. I think we jump onto HIV, we jump onto COVID, because it seems to be the in thing at this point in time, but we have never had a vaccine for chlamydia. Chlamydia is a problem. If you checked at any population, you'll actually find a prevalence of 16 to 18% chlamydia, with consequences of PID and issues of secondary infertility, major problems. You only need to go to an infertility clinic, and what you'll be looking at are consequences of gonorrhea and chlamydia. Ladies and gentlemen, those things have not gone away. Those are areas we still face. Those are the problems we still have. So those are tips that I can give you. We tried making a chlamydia vaccine when I was doing my my PhD. We were almost there, but things happened. We have been trying to make a vaccine with my colleagues quietly for gonorrhea. Again, those who have studied gonorrhea realize about strain variability in gonorrhea, but those are areas of real interest. So as you can see from where I come from, I'm a medical doctor with a PhD. I've had a lot of issues with medical doctors saying, oh, we train a lot, oh, we do all these things, we cannot do PhDs. That is not true. I did it. You guys can do it. And if we really want Africa to develop, we must approach research to the highest level. We need all of us. We need epidemiologists. We need what? We need basic scientists. We need people who really can dissect antigens to their smallest molecules, because that's where, discovery will actually come from. So for us here, that's what I've tried to push. That's what I want to see. And I would like to tease Aga Khan. In Nairobi, University of Nairobi has failed to really develop a good, biotech. Prof, you and your colleagues can begin to think seriously of an offshoot of a biotech that can begin to make products for development. That is actually my biggest next desire. People say that research is not rewarding. Research is very rewarding. I'm not poor. I have done very well, to say the truth, even if somebody doesn't tell me. I think Professor Macharia knows me very well. I've done very well. I've never done any private practice. My work has been academia and research, and I've actually done very well. Some people feel envious because of that, because they don't understand, but it's because research rewards when you concentrate, write proposals, win some, lose some, progress. So you can see my progression to the level where I came back to Kenya in 1998, and we started establishing CAVI. We were just 3 of us. I used to occupy an office like this, 3 of us, when we started developing CAVI as a research unit. Then we grew. Then in 2013, we developed CAVI now as an institute. Now we occupy 3 floors. I was the first director of CAVI from 2013 to 2017. And then from 2017, somebody else took over. But really, again, the pride I have is the legacy I've left behind. CAVI is here, CAVI will stand. We have expanded to do more than just HIV. Prof. Macharia has just told you about the Ebola trial we just conducted. We are now looking into other things, and we are looking for more people to join other thematic areas other than just infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, issues to do with cancer. And then also, one of the best things about research has been the opportunity to network, the opportunity to travel. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that there's any bit of Africa I've not traveled. I don't think there's any bit of the world that I've not traveled. I've been to the northmost area where it is all dark during winter, thanks to research, and it is all daylight during the summer, thanks to winter. So I've had a very good life in terms of doing research. So if you want to really build a career in research, some of the things that you really need to look at are the job responsibilities, the work environment, the skills required, your personal qualities, the work values, qualifications, job titles, career progression, potential pay, and all these other things. So those are the things, ladies and gentlemen, you need to look at very, very critically. But the whole issue is that they say certain things that coming together is a beginning. Working together is progress, and staying together is actually success. What that statement means is network and collaboration. I will not be where I am now had I not collaborated. And I have a huge network of collaborators from India to South Africa to Maybe the only place in the world I've never got a proper collaborator is South America. But in all parts of the world, we have collaborators. So first and foremost, those are the things I've said in terms of growing, but the next thing is network. You cannot do the kind of research we do these days without collaboration. You cannot be a lone ranger. So even in Aga Khan, begin to set yourselves in networks. Begin to apply in groups, not as single individuals. Begin to encompass research holistically. Because anytime, the reason why we succeed at CAVI, when we begin to look at a topic, we look at a topic holistically. For example, we shall look at all aspects of basic science, all aspects of social science, and maybe even the economics that goes with it. And also these days is a whole issue is that, is your research going to influence policy? But policy may not be the major thing. Is your research going to influence practice? So for the last decade, research has changed. Funding is tight, but networks are the things that are actually going to make you succeed. So look for people who think like you. And when you are forming a network, look for people who think like you, people who move like you, people you have some commonalities, people who have a heightened sense of inquiry. The problems I've had with our colleagues in the medical profession is to accept things as they are, to never question. And I'll give you an example. A patient comes in with fever, you find it's malaria. Then you go home. Who says that infections at any one time can only be one at a time? Work that we have been doing in Busia, we're finding fever, somebody has malaria, somebody has mild fever, and somebody has onyonyo. That is the approach. So when you hear, oh, this patient has malaria, there was fever, you go home, the fever is not improving, then you look for the next thing, then you look for the next thing. Why can't you have that mind of inquiry and begin to say, we see patients who are coming in with fever, but these are the three common causes of fever. So when we are looking, we'll do a multiplex to look for these things at the same time. That is the thinking, the inquiry. Never satisfied with enough, because it's never enough. If you're satisfied with enough, you are not growing. And those are the things I want to inculcate in you young people, that at any one time, ask and never stop asking. And that's what I try to do also to my postgraduate students I have here, that let's keep asking. The other aspect of it is what were some of the highlights in my career? Very interesting. When I came back to the College of Health Sciences and I joined Department of Medical Microbiology, a senior colleague of mine, senior colleague because he was my teacher, met me in the corridors and said, oh, Ansala, you are back, yeah, which department are you? Then I said, medical microbiology. Then he said, oh my God, you are going to medical microbiology. There is nothing there. there is nothing there, because he was a surgeon. So I went home and I thought, hey, have I made the wrong choice? Because he told me there is nothing there. He was a big surgeon doing great things in orthopedic surgery. So I went home, I thought, have I made a mistake? But anyway, I soldiered on. You know, when I look back, that's when I realized that in all these arms of medicine, there is something in there. And in medical school, when we went through virology, actually, at the medical school, when I was going through medical school, we only had 2 or 3 lessons in virology. And then immunology was a bit haphazard, it was not really taught, very well. But when I was getting into medical microbiology as a tutorial fellow at that time, I really didn't know all these things. It was an issue of interest, but I also didn't know exactly where I was going. But when I got into Canada and I saw the way people are looking at virology, the way people are looking at immunology, then I got a sense that, well, we were missing something. And you can actually see what viruses have become. I'm sure those of you now who are looking at immunology is not just B cells and T cells. Immunology is just a wonderful world, to be in, from immunology itself to discovery, to understanding cancer, to understanding everything that a human being is in terms of infection, in terms of just normal, even cardiovascular, obesity, all these things, there is an arm of immunology. So when one of my highlights then was that microbiology, hey, Anzala, you are going to be very poor. I'm not poor. But it is my persistence and just saying this is what I've chosen, even if I don't know where I'm going right now. In time, I now realized the decision I made was actually a wise decision. Maybe it was not informed by anything at that time, but it is some of those things when you say, well, I've made this decision, let me pursue where I'm going. So that was one of the highlights. The other highlights that was critical is when I came back, we established CAVI and we said, oh, we need to do a clinical trial. And what was a clinical trial? We had just developed a vaccine with Oxford, and we needed to test it here in Kenya. So we said, we have written the protocol, we submitted to the ethics. The ethics had no capacity to review the protocol. They told us, hey, Professor Anzala, we were with, I was a doctor then, I wasn't a professor, but we were with Professor Buayo, the late Buayo, Professor Achola. They told us this can only be approved in the office of the president. Very interesting. We had given to the ethics committee, they said, we can't, we don't have capacity, office of the president. So we carried these volumes. I remember myself with the late Professor Buayo, we went to the office of the president, we presented to the PS. So the PS was wondering, what do you guys want us to do? So we said, we were told to bring it here. So they stamped it and gave us a permit. All right? Then now we said, oh, now we have a permit to do, the research. How do we bring in the product? So we went to the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, but at least at the Pharmacy and the Poisons Board, there was a bit of procedure. They told us, oh, you need a permit to import the investigational product. Another good highlight. So we did that. And what we did at that time actually led to establishment of doing clinical trials in Kenya and in Africa. Actually, Kenya was the second country to do clinical trials on investigation of product. Uganda had just started before us. But then with that, we developed the structure of how to review these protocols, what to do when you go to the ministry, what to do when you go to PPB. So then they did away with the office of the president. So again, there, we were not really shaping policy, we were actually shaping practice. Now you can easily conduct a clinical trial of a new product. I'm sure Aga Khan has a process. You'll end up at the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. They look at all the dossier. You'll get your permit to import the product, and you actually start work. And now there is even local registration, so that any clinical trial you are doing, regardless of whether it is vaccine or drug or repurposed drug, you can actually register that within the PPB and the NACOSTI. So this is really my pride, that it was uncharted territory, but we have informed practice. It is now straightforward and very easy to actually do that. Some of the most interesting things was when our own colleagues, when we started doing, we are going to conduct a clinical trial on the vaccines. Then most doctors, the only, I'm sorry to say, the only vaccine they knew is a live attenuated. The measles vaccines and the polio vaccines. So when we started talking that this is not live attenuated, this is a recombinant, non-replicating, then they were wondering, you know, what are you guys talking about? Because for them, vaccines were nothing other than live attenuated. And I'm glad now, that's what I'm telling you, immunology has really grown. You are hearing of platforms like mRNA vaccines. You are hearing platforms like replicating mRNA. You are hearing platforms like nanoparticles. You are hearing recombinants, and recombinants, we are talking of non-replicating, we are talking of replicating. So you can actually see, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a nice time. We have good science we can actually discuss. And some of these things are the things we are actually doing at CAVI. At CAVI here, we can actually look at the highlights is when we brought in a confocal microscope that we can actually look at explants. That's another highlight, explants. Explants is exactly, instead of looking at tissue, instead of looking at cells on a petri dish, you are actually looking at tissue. You get tissue, you slice tissue in small bits, you grow it in culture, and you can actually look at how the virus penetrates that tissue live. You stain the virus particle and you light it up, and over a period of days, you can be looking at that tissue under a microscope and actually see how the virus penetrates, which cells the virus is binding. And with this kind of technology, you can actually then put in interventions. You can put in antiretroviral drugs and you see whether they actually stop replication. You can actually put in antibodies and you see actually whether they can bind to the virus and stop the virus from infecting cells. So those of you who are in science now, you are in science at a very good time. For me, this is the technology that I had to work very hard to transfer it here, and it is here now. You know, the other good aspects is sequencing. We now have ability to use what we call nanopore Oxford sequencing, where we can actually sequence huge chunks. We just completed sequencing gonorrhea, resistant gonorrhea. We are now looking at bioinformatics, just to look at whether that resistance is known mutations or whether they are actually new mutations that we don't know of. So we are in very nice time. So I have so many nice highlights I can present to you, but this is the area I want to interest you. You can only do that if you go to the basics. As a doctor, you can do your PhD in basic science. As a doctor, you can do these things I'm telling you because I'm not doing them in Europe, I am actually doing them here. So the next big highlight, we now want to move into product development. When we sequence gonorrhea to the bits, can bioinformatics tell us whether we can use that information to develop point-of-care diagnostics, to point out areas where we can use to highlight the areas that will be of interest for vaccine development, areas that will be of interest for drug development. This is now my next big frontier. But I'm now reached an age whereby I must be handing over to the next level of generation. Just because you are in Aga Khan does not stop you from collaborating with us. And I've told you, we must collaborate. We don't have any projects, joint projects with Aga Khan, other than maybe the antimicrobial resistant work that is going on now. But that is more of a program, right? My interest is really to dissect these things to the minutest level so that we can now begin to develop products in a biotechnology way. So Prof. Macharia, let's begin to think of the next big grant. let's begin to think of how we can write this next big grant jointly, so that we can influence the next generation to begin to think at that level of basic science, but also basic science, not just for publication and abstracts, but basic science for purposes of product developments. So skills. In basic science, there are so many aspects of skills. You can hone down in immunology. You can hone down on virology and look at virology in minute levels. You can hone down on bioinformatics and look at bioinformatics at the lowest level. You can look at modeling and try to understand medical modeling and epidemiology to help us understand where we are going to be 5-6 years from now. You can begin to look at entomology from the point, because sometimes medical doctors don't think that entomology is important, but it is critical. Because when we look at the environment, I can simply tell you that it is interesting to look at vectors, because we are actually seeing malaria, we are actually seeing vectors, like Anopheles carrying 2 infectious agents at the same time. We actually dissected some Anopheles, and we found that it was carrying malaria plus some other viruses at the same time. So then what does it mean, for an impending, outbreak? So those things can be done by us. And because you are a medical doctor, it puts you in a better position to interpret that data than just a basic scientist who doesn't have a medical background. So part of what has really helped me succeed is actually having that aspect of understanding medicine to the core, but also bringing in basic science understanding, to the core. It took me from my master's to a PhD was a period of about 9 years of continuous reading, hard work, and ensuring that we pass exams. And the 9 years is not too long for those of us, and we are still alive now, but also taking into account, Professor Macharia, that now we are living longer. When I was in Canada and I was beginning as a master's student, there were professors there who were 80 years old and still very, very active. So sometimes medical doctors say, oh, I'm going to be in school for long. Oh, no. It's not too long. 9 years, I've been there. And I believe I'm still young enough, I can still jog. I'm sure Professor Macharia has seen me jogging. So you can do it. You can do it. So those are really the areas, that we really want you to look at critically, to push critically, and to ensure that we begin to build a really a concrete mass of very well-educated Kenyans who understand medicine, who can do basic science, who can do good epidemiology, who can do good modeling, who understand, cardiovascular disease, but ask very basic, questions and things, of that nature. For example, we have been seeing esophageal cancer coming from certain regions in this country. I have never seen somebody asking, is it the soil? Is it the food? Our interest is just to cut and say this is cancer, we treat. But where I'm coming from is that I want us to move upstream and understand that environment if it is, and say, can we put in preventive measures? Let us not be the kind of doctors who sit in the hospitals and wait for patients to get sick. No, that's not the way, the direction we want to take. The direction we want to take is to think upstream. If it's in Nyeri, is it the soil? is it anything to do with aflatoxins, or is it something else? And if it is, what can we do upstream in terms of prevention? So that's really areas where I really want us to come from. Even the cervical cancer, is it just HPV, or is there a combination of HPV and CMV? So that even if we are controlling for HPV, could there be something else that we are leaving out? Could it be host? Could we look at the various markers in these individuals? Can we begin to look at the African genome and begin to tease out whether there are any telltale features in the African genome that predisposes us to certain non-communicable diseases? Gentlemen, those answers cannot come from Europe. Those answers need to come from us.
Professor Mzala, thank you so much for that excellent presentation, keynote address.
I have not finished. I have not finished, okay? All right, I have not finished. So really, I was told it is up to 6:30, or mine was only short.
So Prof, we have another session, and then
okay. So let me just conclude. I can come back again, but this is my prayer, ladies and gentlemen. We have the capacity. We need the critical mass. Stop sitting in hospitals and waiting, for patients to get sick and come there. Let's begin to look at what we can do real upstream. But that, in a nutshell, is really my journey. And it's a wonderful journey. I've enjoyed it. There have been lows, but most of the time we have had highs. It pays good in research. You can succeed in research. We don't have all to be in private practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. That was excellent, Dr. Mzala, for sharing your very inspirational journey from Magadi to Manitoba and back to Kenya. Thank you for all the contribution you've made over the years and continue to make. Thank you very much. So we move on to the next session, and it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Khalid Makhdoumi, who is a nuclear physicist here at the Department of Radiology at the Khan University Hospital, to chair over the next session. Unfortunately, we just have the one presentation and followed by a Q&A. Thank you.
Oops, sorry, sir.
Hello. Good evening. Welcome to this session on the diagnostics. I think we should be able to catch up on the time because we have only one presentation during this session. And I would request the speaker, Dr. Margaret Mornier, who is from the Department of Radiology at our hospital, and will be presenting their dissertation study that he had done, and the topic of which was discordance between breast imaging and pathology findings after ultrasound-guided core-needle biopsy. Dr. Mornier, you're ready? The floor is yours.
Radiology department, and I'll be presenting my dissertation results, which are on discordance between breast imaging and pathology findings after ultrasound-guided core needle biopsy. Breast cancer is the most common prevalent cancer among women worldwide, with an estimated global incidence of 11.6%. According to the Global Can Fact Sheet, in 2018, breast cancer incidence in Kenya was 40.3 per 100,000. Early detection and diagnosis of breast cancer has been shown to reduce mortality and increase years of life gained. Breast lesion diagnosis is heavily based on imaging and pathology, and typically findings are reported independent of one another. Correlation of imaging findings and pathology after biopsy is found to be of critical importance in detecting possible sampling error, concordance versus discordance. BIRADS classification is used to guide on which lesions can be biopsied depending on likelihood of cancer. BIRADS 4 and 5 lesions are routinely biopsied, while BIRADS 3 lesions are only biopsied upon patient or physician request or when patient is likely to follow up. The histology results are then correlated with radiologic findings, and Parikh and Tickman described possible outcomes after imaging pathology correlation in a sonography-guided core-needle biopsy of a breast lesion, which are concordant malignant, discordant malignant, concordant benign, discordant benign, and borderline or high-risk lesions. Within each category, appropriate action should be taken without any delay. For discordant malignant and discordant benign cases, they should be notified to the pathologist and discussed in a clinical radiopathologic meeting. My primary objective was to determine the prevalence of imaging pathology discordance on breast core biopsies done at Aga Khan University Hospital, Nairobi. Second objectives were to evaluate relationship between discordancy and imaging features such as size of lesion, shape, margins, type of lesion, virus category, imaging modality, and age. A second objective was to evaluate the type of pathologies commonly with discordant findings, and also to look at the surgical, follow-up, or repeat biopsy outcomes for discordant results. Most of the initial histology results were concordant with the radiological findings, and the prevalence of breast imaging histology discordancy was 11.3% in the 416 cases recruited in this study, a percentage slightly higher compared to the range of 1 to 8% in studies reported in literature. And this could be explained partly by the different levels of experience and expertise by those doing breast ultrasound imaging, and the fact that new advances in imaging such as elastography are not routinely done at our institution and yet are known to further enhance characterization of lesions. Association of discordancy and imaging features. There was an association between discordancy and BIRADS categories on imaging with a significant p-value of 0.001. BIRADS 4B and 4C lesions were 5 times likely to be discordant, which means there's a higher accuracy of predictability of the extremes of BIRADS categories. Several studies have identified high concordance rates for the extremes of the BIRADS categories, and these are likely because BIRADS 4B and 4C categories lack clearly defining features for each subdivision. There was an association between discordancy and lesion shape with a significant p-value of 0.027. Irregular lesions were more likely to have discordant outcome, and lesions with an irregular shape are usually considered BIRADS 4 or 5 lesions, though they do not always indicate malignancy, and that this would explain why they have higher discordancy. There was no statistical significant association between discordancy and margins, shape, type of lesion, and imaging modality. Del Frate et al. Showed that small lesions had a lower inter-observer agreement and were likely to have discordant results, and a retrospective study on 1,314 patients by Alana et al. Found no association between discordancy and lesion type. The most common initial histological diagnosis for the discordant cases was fibrocystic changes, benign fibroepithelial lesions, and benign breast tissue, forming 44.7% of the total discordant cases, which raises the question of whether variable appearances of these lesions contribute to their discordant imaging findings. Radiopathologic meetings were done for only 13 of the discordant cases, and communication of the discordant cases to the primary doctor was recorded in only 5. 3 cases of malignancy were confirmed on follow-up, forming 6.4% of the total discordant cases, and these were picked after surgical excision. Majority of the follow-up cases were benign, 38.3%, and a study by Ekut et al. Subsequently picked 27.5% malignancies from the discordant cases after surgical excision, while Libert et al. Showed 25% malignancy on repeat biopsy. 34% of the cases had no recorded follow-up, as shown on the table projected. The lower percentages of subsequently picked malignancies in our study could be attributed to the higher number of cases with no records on follow-up. So in conclusion, the overall prevalence of breast imaging histology discordancy was 11.3% of the 416 cases recruited in this study, a percentage slightly higher compared to the range of 1 to 8% in studies reported in literature. All these cases were discordant benign, and follow-up outcome showed 6.4% upgrade to malignancy, emphasizing a need for post-biopsy correlation and follow-up. In this study, there was association between discordancy and viral scattering. So the recommendations are the fact that there was an upgrade to malignancy of 4.6% of the discordant cases emphasizes the importance of breast imaging histologic correlation. The radiologist should initiate a clinical radiopathological meeting to review all the discordant cases, and establishment of a comprehensive breast cancer would improve communication among the different disciplines, ensuring timely review of cases deemed discordant, a mechanism of timely follow-up of patients with discordancy, and finally a multi-institutional study to evaluate the regional prevalence of breast imaging histology discordancy is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monia, for that good and concise presentation and for keeping to time. While we are waiting for questions to come up, I think I would like to emphasize the importance of this study because diagnostic plays a very important role in management of cancers, and breast cancer is one of the important main cancers that we deal with. So it's very important to look at the discordance or concordance of the two main arms of diagnostics, that is radiology and pathology. And I think it's also important in this case, as you have suggested, that the tumor boards where there are multiple departments looking at the same cases, discussing cases, we look at radiology and we look at pathology, so that if there are any discordances, they are thrashed out and we can come to the right conclusions are very important. I can start with just asking, you mentioned about certain new advancements in ultrasound like elastography, and if I understand correctly, your study did not include that in your analysis. Would that make a difference looking at the new advancements in the imaging in terms of reducing the discordance?
Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for the question. Yes, studies have shown that elastography does improve further characterization of breast lesions. And in our institution, we don't routinely do that. So that could be a potential reason why our discordance rate is slightly higher compared to the rates in literature.
Okay, I do not have any questions so far from the audience. I don't know whether Dr. Shaheen, this is a very topical topic for you. Do you have any questions that you might want to ask, or any comments about this study?
Thank you, Dr. Monia. That was an excellent presentation. Just a comment that through this study, we have become more diligent in terms of now making sure that as soon as we get a result that is discordant, we have a combined radiopathological meeting, and that is even before the tumor boards. And we have resolved and we decide whether we need a repeat or a follow-up imaging. So I think it has impacted on practice and has improved the way we work. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr. Shane. I think this clearly demonstrates the importance of research in improving our practices. I still do not have any other questions, so I think we can bring this session to an end. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahumi, for chairing this session. So now we go to the next part of the program, and it's another yet exciting session that will be chaired by Professor Marlene Temmerman. But while we are having this panel discussion, we have the judges will be taking some time out and will be taking a break to judge all the presentations from yesterday and today and providing scores. And towards the end, there will be a very exciting award ceremony, even though it's going to be online. So our judges, by the way, are our very own Professor Robert Armstrong, who is an emeritus professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of British Columbia. But of course, you all remember and recall, not too long back, he was the founding dean of our medical college. And while having returned to Vancouver, he continues collaborations with colleagues at AKU and is as well a board member of the Aga Khan Health Services Kenya, and he's committed to building these relationships and networks between AKU and Canadian universities. So welcome back, Prof. Armstrong. You are always welcome home because this is your home, even though it may be your second home. And the other judge that we have is Dr. Grace Edwards, and allow me to for those who are not familiar with her, Dr. Edwards commenced her nursing training in 1974, and she qualified as a midwife in 1978, working as a hospital midwife and a community midwife for 12 years, during which she completed her advanced diploma of midwifery and certification in education. And then she took up a post as a midwife teacher in 1988 and completed a master's in education. I'll just go to what in 2016, she was appointed to her present post at the Aga Khan University Foundation, Professor of Midwifery, to lead a midwifery education and practice for AKU in East Africa. And in 2017, she was awarded an honorary post as Professor of Midwifery at Salford University of the UK. So we welcome the judges and we thank them for their time and contribution. So we'll allow them to step out of the session and welcome Marlene for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaheen, and a very good evening to all of you. My name is Marlene Temmerman. I'm Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Chair of Department, and Director of the Center of Excellence Research Center within AKU, focusing on women, children, and more also on adolescents. I'm very happy and very pleased now to chair this session with the title, What Informs Young Graduates' Choice to Consider a Career in Health Research. And I have three very well-known panel members, at least in AKU. You see their pictures and the departments where they belong, and the three of them are like in their mid-career. And I would like the three of them to shortly introduce them. And during the introduction, to tell us why they are choosing a career path within the university, because they are trying to grow and to develop their career in research in a young university that we are. All universities have to balance the three mandates: the mandate of teaching training, research, and service delivery, which is in the medical faculty clearly patient care, which is a very difficult task. And all of us are kind of struggling with it. And we have to keep that balance professionally and also with our private lives. So maybe starting with Dr. Rose Ndumia. Rose, tell us a little bit about yourself and about the factors that made you choosing for your this research path.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to be part of the symposium. My name is Dr. Rose Ndumia, and I'm the program director for the Radiology Residency Training Program. I'm also the section head of breast imaging. And the reason why I chose to be in a university setting, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So the reason why I chose to be in a university setup is partly of what Marlene is talking about, that you want to combine the three components of education, academia, research, and your clinical work. And for me, I find the three of them really tie up together such that when I'm looking at clinical cases and I have questions, I'm doing a critical analysis, then those are the questions that then feed into research questions. And you can be part of that research work, even in supervising your residents in their training program and their dissertation work. And then the information that you get there is now what you get an opportunity to implement in your work and to build up on the academia. So for me, I find it very fulfilling that I can be able to integrate the three components in such an institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rose. And the same question to Dr. Benjamin Wachira. Benjamin, what were the opportunities? What were the opportunities provided to you to kind of support your research track? And before you answer, I have to ask all of you to switch on your videos, because we have seen your wonderful pictures, but we would like to interact with you. So Benjamin, switch on the video, please.
Thanks, Marlene. Give me a few seconds to figure out the video, but let me introduce myself, then I'll figure out the video part after my introduction so that we can move on. Yeah, I'm Benjamin O'Shea. I'm an emergency physician at the Aga Khan Hospital. I work with the emergency services. I think for me, the choice to go into academia was driven by the fact that I'm in a field that really is not well established or grown within the country. And for me, it was an opportunity to develop a specialty that is life-saving in a country that didn't have much in terms of emergency care. But specifically, so that's the academic part of it, but specifically also at AKU was the chance to practice evidence-based emergency care and try and work a way to integrate that and translate the advances in emergency care that we get at Aga Khan into the public sphere. So at the end of it all, my objectives in my research projects are mainly to see universal emergency care practice within Kenya to the standards practice at AKU.
Thank you, Benjamin. And then number 3 on the panel is Dr. Musana from my own department, OBGYN. Joseph, you have had some opportunities given to you by the university. Tell us a bit about your aims, but also about your time at UCSF and how did that fit in your in your faculty program. Over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Marlene. So yeah, my name is Joseph Musana, full-time faculty in obstetrics and gynecology. And I've been in this young university close to nearly its inception, with the first trainees in 2007, 2008. I think what attracted me to this sort of setup was the reason that, apart just being a busy clinician, it's also important that you go and answer some core questions in the community. So the way Prof. Omwanzala said that you have to go upstream. So it was not so fulfilling just to sit in the office and get the sick patients and being on the curative end, but also to go into the preventive and the questioning end. It's good for younger people also to develop interest early, seek higher education early, which is lined with research. So once you make you have passion and you have made this decision, start early. Get more training in epidemiology, research methods, statistics, and so on, which I got the chance to do at the UCSF. A very robust training, actually a 3-year training, transdisciplinary, multi-year training, which ended up with a postdoctoral fellowship in clinical research and has advanced training in epidemiology and statistics and clinical research methods. So, and this was very important in boosting your presentations, your preparation as a researcher to attract more grants and have people, the granting agencies and people who can trust you with their money to do a lot of important work. So I think that that's what I can say for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My other question is, as I said, we are a young university. We come from a hospital, university hospital, medical college. You know, the research space doesn't just come dropping from heaven or from wherever. We have done, and Prof. Macharia is leading our research departments, and a lot has changed. But I would like to hear from you, how as an institution can we improve that or grow that research culture within our organization and beyond? Because what I hear from you, and it's very great, you have chosen research track, you have each said why, but do you feel like, you know, you are individuals struggling? Dr. Musana, you came back from UCSF, but your task here is again mainly to do clinical work. So how do you keep that balance? And how do you build as an institution that not only your own individual track to a PhD, but the research culture? I would like briefly, maybe starting with Dr. Musana and going in the other direction. Joseph.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Yeah, it's usually not an easy task, especially in a young university, where we have not formed a lot of core university or groups, research or a mechanism, because when I came from UCSF, there were quite a number of teething problems, even administering the grant money in the university structure. And because, of course, we are a young university, we have not developed a robust grant mechanism system to administer grants efficiently. So it's not an easy task. You must have perseverance, patience, and persistence in order to accomplish many things. And getting that sweet spot between clinical work, academic work, teaching and learning, and research. Also, it's not an easy task. But I'm glad the university is now focusing, and it has done quite a number of things, instituting a well-oiled machine for grant mechanisms. All those things will help boosting departments and asking a few core faculty who are interested into that path to take that path, other than probably pushing every faculty into research, but trying to have core people who can drive the research agenda in the university-wide, and actually thinking of ways on compensating them on equal footing with clinicians. I think we are on that journey and we are on that path, and I think the model that the university is taking is a good model, but with it will need quite a bit of improvements as we go along.
Thank you, Dr. Wachira. So you are a very busy clinician. Do you feel like you have enough protected time to do your research? do we as an institution install that culture of having support? Of course, you have to look for your own writing your grants and trying to do resource mobilization, but then do you feel like you have enough protected time? And what would be your advice to the chairs and the leadership of this medical college to improve, to support?
Thanks, Marlene. I'm not sure what constitutes protected time. The ED for us is 24/7. So, and we have skeleton faculty in our department. So, yeah, I'm not sure what protected time is. But that said and done, I think there is a need for the institution, at least from the university perspective, to give or to have a research agenda, research direction driven by the departments, and also look at situations to support the potential researchers in some of the bits and pieces that don't necessarily need a lot of technical work. Like I may have a research idea and I may know exactly what needs to be done, but I may not necessarily have the protected time to sit down and go through all the paperwork. I mean, I'll tell you, some of those forms are daunting, and I don't need to be that. I mean, you don't need to be at that graduate level to fill that form, but it just takes a lot of time to gather some of that information. So some of that support can be provided where there are potential research, multifaceted research assistants who can help you with the bits and pieces that are not technical. So it may be research, for example, in emergency care. So I know the emergency care part, and I can do that part easy, but the rest of that paperwork is really not emergency care. And if we can get such support, then that will also make it more comfortable for people to start looking at filling in this proposal, writing all the paperwork involved. I'll tell you, for example, anytime I have a lot of colleagues in the West who would be like, oh yeah, we'd like to do a research project together. In my head, I'm like, the amount of paperwork involved with that is just too much. Like, I'd rather not engage with you purely because of the paperwork. And it's not the concept part, it's not the methodology part, it's all the other signatures and forms that are involved. And if this part can be, the institution can provide such support where the researchers can work with some research assistants that exist in the research department who then are able to fill up all the other parts, then that would be really helpful. Because I don't know, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I don't know what protected time is, and again, it's because there is the demand from the clinical perspective, from the teaching perspective, and then of course you still have to produce research. So I think that would be my recommendation. There's need for more research assistance for the non-technical staff.
Thanks, Benjamin. And I see Prof. Macharia, the Associate Dean for the Research, taking notes. I'm sure that he is going to take your suggestions further, but it is indeed, I think, in the last years, at least in my experience, in the last 2 or 3 years, there really has been a lot of improvement and investment in the research support from the offices, but more needs to be done always, of course. So Rose, over to you. Why, in most of our departments, if you spend like half a day as a clinician, you make more money than that half day as a research. And our founding dean, Prof. Armstrong, has done a lot, and of course with the leadership, to kind of ensure some protected time. That the difference is maybe not that huge if you spend a few 10% of research and 10% of clinical work, but still research is not as rewarding financially. I mean, so why would faculty then really choose for a research career?
That's true. There's the element of where the financial impetus to do research is really not forthcoming. But on the other hand, I think the reason why someone would want to do research, in my opinion, would be because of the passion that you have. If you're passionate about it, you'll go about it. And as much as the grant application process is challenging, I think that can be another way in which you can channel funds that will support your research career, and that will find fulfillment. I think Professor Omwanzala alluded to this, where he said his career has been rewarding. He's not had to do clinical work because of the grants and the support that he's had in the process. So I think if we can work on the grant applications and have a way in which that grant application money then feeds into your remuneration, then there would be more impetus for people to do more research work. And I think the other thing is just to demystify the whole grant application process, the research process, the publication process. I was just talking this afternoon with one of our recently graduated residents, and I was asking him about his dissertation, whether he has any plans of publishing. And you could see him starting to tense up and look like this is such uncharted territory. He feels like he needs to be held by the hand and walk through the entire process. So there's also the element, other than giving me protected time, I need to know what I should be doing this time and how to best utilize it. And I think there's role for having mentors or role models who have already gone through this field that can help other more junior people to rise up through that ladder. And one example is like in some institutions, we have what is called research cafes. So in these research cafes, you have people from different departments meeting up together and building up ideas on research. I think in the university right now, we do a lot of our research in silos and probably get someone from another department because we think it would fit you very well. But I think having these research cafes brings in more ideas and how one element, you might think of it from a diagnostic perspective, can be very different when you deal with a physician who's seeing patients with that entity on a daily basis. I think there's still room for improvement, but I think passion first and then the rest will follow.
Thank you, Rose. Now, a quick last question to all of you. What brings us together here as faculty, there are a lot of efforts done for bringing research at a higher level, but let's say we all have the FAR on Thursday morning. That is 1 hour where we share the residents and faculty, the work, new ideas and so on. But it is very often a kind of just listening and then a few questions at the end. So what would you suggest from your own perspective on kind of increasing this research culture? Should we have more journal clubs? Should we have maybe multi-center research session, more on grant writing proposals? We tried in the past to organize workshops on how do you improve your success in grant writing. It was not a big success, I must say. You remember Brahmacharya, we didn't, this is not kind of something to be proud of. And we gave up, but maybe we should do that again. So what, your step in your career, very briefly, each of you, starting now with Rose, going in the other direction, what would you propose?
I think the FAR sessions are pretty well structured in terms of going through residents' proposals and their results. I think the 1 hour session fits in very well, and even appreciate the aspect of bringing researchers, external institutions to share with us their work. It really motivates us and think differently. For me, what I think is maybe having separate sessions from the FAR where you have a practical session with somebody who already has a research project that they want to write a proposal on, and you have maybe a group of people come up with their ideas, and you have somebody walk through them. I think there's been lots of growth in terms of our residents and their research training, but when it comes to the faculty, I sometimes have discussed this with my faculty, and there are people who will tell you, I feel weak in terms of my research capacity. I think even some of the residents are better than me at this. I think right now we're doing very well for our residents. I think for faculty and instructors, this is an area that we need to grow them on. And I feel like a more cohesive group where if you're dealing with maybe proposal development, you have a session where all of you can be brought together and have experts in that area who can assist. Maybe you're thinking about grant application, then a group can be brought together and shown how to go through the process and perhaps even automate the process. I know in some departments it's automated, but if we could have this now stretched out to all departments, that would be really helpful. And lastly, when it comes to publication, I think we've had workshops in the past about how to go about publishing, but then we need to have this on a more frequent basis and with people who already have research that they've done and now want to go ahead and publish it. So more of a hands-on process, which I think may require more than the 1 hour. And I think the FAR is already a very good starting point, and maybe can build up to maybe practice sessions or workshop sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Benjamin, Dr. Chair, 2 minutes, very briefly. Your
medical perspective and an undergraduate level. I think the FAR sessions, yes, they're useful, but they think there's also more, there's a need to incorporate a lot of journal clubs and also evidence-based practice within the institution, where people are encouraged to read and interpret papers frequently. I know there is the first years go through some session where they're taught about how to read research papers and all that. But I think also in terms of clinical practice, I think within the institution, we need to also encourage a lot of evidence-based practice where there's frequent discussions across different research papers that are coming across, new guidelines that are coming across, so that it becomes part of the culture where as you manage cases within the hospital, then there's reference to some research and this is interrogated deeply so that people understand the connection between research and clinical practice. So I think there's also that gap where a lot of people look at it as two separate processes where there's research as one whole thing, and then clinical practice. So I read this paper, but I'm going to do this differently. So I think there's a need to blend the practice with the research, understanding research, and this should be encouraged to residents in everyday clinical practice. And this will need that the faculty also get engaged in interpreting a lot of this research and doing more shorter journal interrogation, I guess, with residents as they go through their practice.
Thank you, Benjamin. And the last word for Dr. Musana.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Malin. I think most has been said by Dr. Rose and Dr. Benjamin. Yeah, we should encourage more journal clubs, small groups in our departments to get into the culture of research. So frequent journal clubs, fortnightly journal clubs within departments, that improves the dissemination of knowledge and culture. Then, as Dr. Rosa said, find out how we can break down the silos so that if I know Benjamin, Rose, myself, and other people in other departments are trying to improve the culture of research in the university-wide among faculty and residents, then we could get together and find ways on how do we strengthen that. How do we have maybe champions or point people within the university and faculty who can be meeting and championing and getting ideas, even up to grant writing as a group, and that I think will improve. So we should find ways of breaking that silo and getting more cohesive and building a good research machine.
Thank you very much, and a big thank you to the three of you. I think it was a very interesting panel, very good suggestions coming up. There are in the chat box questions, but we don't have time for a Q&A session. We will, of course, capture these. So thank you very much, and a big clap for the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Malin, for keeping to time and for chairing such an interesting and exciting session. So before we go to the awards ceremony, there'll be a voting exercise, and you as the audience will get an opportunity to vote for what you think was the best presentation. So I will call upon Stephen Musioka from Communications, is also part of the organizing committee, to take you through the voting process, and then it will be time for the awards. So Stephen will be able to see live vote here, correct? Yes. Perfect.
So right now there should be, if you can type the address aku.edu/AECHRS, we are going to share it on the chat box right now, and it should open a Google form. You don't need to sign in, so that way you're able to cast your vote. So if you can just, we'll be sharing that URL in a few. So just look at the chat box. Alternatively, you can also visit the event webpage. We've put it there. So just give us a minute. We are loading the link to the chat box right now. So yeah, keep the votes coming. I can see we have 13 votes so far. If you need the voting link, it's on the chat box. We've just shared it. Alternatively, you can visit the event webpage. The link is there as well. Okay. So 3 more minutes to go. We close at 7:05. The presenters, you can share the links with your friends. No need for the music. Yeah, we just use 2%. So you can see the green is actually. So 1 minute. Okay. So 7:05 right now. So with it's 7:05. We give it 5 minutes for voting, and just to be clear, we can see this should be the one 23%, right? Yeah, because it's the one with the 22%. So we need, just move the cursor to the 22. We need to point. Who is on 22? That should be assessment. That's by Linda Barasa. So are we all in agreement? Sorry? Yeah, but by the time we were calling it off, it was the one which was leading. Yeah, so I guess you're in agreement? Yep, okay. Yeah, and also another thing is there's also a timestamp on this. So if someone voted beyond that, we can actually see the second they even voted. So we will still sift it. We did not put that, but even unless you use a secondary email address. So congratulations, Linda. The results will be available in case there's any dispute. Thank you. We need to see Subrana should be, so we have 24. Yeah, Caroline, session. Okay.
For this one. Oh. Okay, that was an exciting part of the evening. So great pleasure in inviting now Professor Armstrong to take us through the judging process and then to announce the winners. Prof. Armstrong.
Good afternoon, good evening there, and a real pleasure to chair the judging session. And I want to start by, sorry, I can't seem to share my video for some reason. Can you hear me?
Try hard. We need to see what. Please turn on your video.
tried, but it says it's unstable. Oh, there it goes. Okay, let me start. So again, good evening, and I know you're anxious to go home. I just want to first of all thank William and the team for organizing the session, and it's been a real opportunity to be able to join you courtesy of COVID-19. I don't think any of us would have wanted that to happen. But really, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for naming the audience winner of the presentations in my behalf. And it's very interesting because it's hard to know what the real answer is here, because you're going to get a slightly different answer in our presentation to you. But I think the key message from all three of us, Connie, Grace, and myself, is the very high quality of the presentations that were done, both in the poster sessions as well as in the presentations. I think it's a reflection of the evolution of the organization. And I think the messages that Dr. Koch and Dr. Nzala gave to us ring very well in relation to what was actually presented. All of these ideas are research careers, in fact, if the individuals want to pursue them. So let me get to the results. And I think, Stephen, you're going to put them up. Okay, you see the judges. I think I want to thank Connie and Grace for their insightful comments in ranking the posters and presentations. It's hard to know whether audience or judges are more reliable, but this is what our the outcome of our deliberations have been. So next slide. So as you know, there's a generous award for winners, and the funds are meant to go towards their academic development, and you can see the areas in which individuals can spend the funds that are awarded to them, and it's all subject, obviously, to the university approval. So next slide. So this is, we're going from runner-up in presentations to success, awarding the first prize in the abstracts, in the posters, and then to the oral presentations. So we're really pleased to say that Edwin Massara won the follow-up award in the poster presentation category. For correlation between prostate-specific antigen density and prostate cancer among African men at AKU. Very well-designed, well-presented poster, something that is of importance clinically. So congratulations to Edwin. Next, and there should be applause after all of these, I know, but it's difficult to do applause in this setting. But we applaud you. Next winner. The winner of the poster presentation is Imran Jamal. Very well presented, very important topic and relevant to day-to-day practice, and a demonstration of how you can bring together important information to influence practice. The clinical and demographic profile of multiple sclerosis at AKUHN. And so he has awarded a certificate, a shield, and 30,000 shillings to advance his education. So those were the posters. I think there were some challenges with the poster presentations, and I think William has acknowledged that early on, but overall, posters are an extremely important part of academic medicine and quality, important way to present. In fact, many of the meetings, international meetings, if they ever happen again, poster presentations have equal value to oral presentations and are very important communication tools. So congratulations to the presenters of posters. Let's go to the next. So The runner-up for the oral presentation was Sharon Omenda from the International Center for Reproductive Health in Kenya, multi-month dispensing as a component of differentiated care model adaptations in HIV service for key populations during COVID-19 pandemic. Sharon presented an important paper and presented it extremely well. But also to say, just as in the voting that was done, many other high quality presentations, very impressive. But our view was that Sharon was the runner-up for this. And finally, the winner of the oral presentation is Linda Barasa, the assessment of palliative care needs in Kenya, in Kenya intensive care unit using a trigger-based model. We felt Linda did an outstanding presentation, important topic, and will impact clinical practice. I think she wasn't the same as the audience awardee, but I will just repeat again that the quality of all of the presentations was very high, very challenging to pick the best. And I want to congratulate on behalf of both Connie and Grace and myself, the work that went into these presentations. I know there was applause for Linda, but we will now, I believe, turn it back to William to close the session.
Thank you all very, very much. I would also like to, and I do apologize for missing out on, one of the judges, Constance Shumba. So I do apologize to her. Please, my personal apology. And thank you very, very much for your contributions and for staying up so late. For those who are outside the country and being here with us at this time. So for the next session, we have a vote of thanks. And this will be given by Isabel Combo from the head of the academic division of the SONA, which is the School of Nursing and Midwifery, Kenya.
Good evening all. Some of them is after me, like Bob. So this is just to close up the symposium. It has really been a great experience and a new experience. The collaboration, it was a collaboration effort by many people, so we will take this time to also give them a vote of thanks. Of course, we have very unique circumstances at the moment because of the COVID crisis. So we are all learning to be adaptable and do things in different ways. And I think this has helped us to grow and also to ensure that nothing is left out. If we had a calendar that said we were going to have a symposium, then we will have a symposium. The symposium has also served to remind us that research requires hard work, it requires commitment, and it also requires passion. You can't be involved in research unless you're passionate about it. As a young university, we need to be more involved in research. I think you've all noticed that most of the presentations have come from medical college, so maybe people are wondering, do grants only go to medical college personnel? But there has been a lot of research going on in the School of Nursing and grants application. So I think what calls for us is to all take that example from medical college to also make sure that we do presentations. It also calls for us in future to enhance our collaboration, both in grant writing, in involvement in clinical research, and as has been mentioned, increasing of journal clubs. That I think is a gap we still have and need to improve in terms of encouraging people to get interested in research. So great appreciation to the leadership, especially Professor Lukoye from Dean of Medical College and Dr. Eunice Tirambo, Dean of School of Nursing. They were here to give introductory remarks, so appreciation to them. We had two keynote speakers, that was Dr. Anzala, who is a seasoned researcher, and he has really encouraged us. And both Dr. Anzala and Dr. Angela Koech, who is an early researcher, have given us a journey, an experience of their research journey. So, you know, if you're a beginner, you could probably identify some experiences that you're going through. And if you're a seasoned researcher, you can see there's no end to it. If you start committing yourself to research, it's a lifelong journey and a lifelong learning experience. So we do appreciate their thoughts and the experiences that they've shared. We have much to learn from them. We appreciate the judges who have just given us the winner. And you can see the participants were also judging, and I think we were in the same thought process. So that was good to see. Appreciation to Connie, Grace, and Bob Armstrong. I think this is an interesting way of giving awards and encouraging people to see there is someone saying that research doesn't pay well. At least there's some encouragement with a bit of monetary reward towards their research activities. Also to thank the chairs who have made sure that all the sessions go as they were planned, make sure time has been kept, questions have been articulated well for the presenters to be able to answer. We had Professor Rodney Adams yesterday and Professor Stanley Luchas. We also have today Dr. Nancy Kunyiha, Dr. Halid Mokdomi, and Professor Malin Temaman, who has done the panel discussion. And also we have had people who have been working in the background for many months to ensure that this exercise goes on as planned. And that is the committee that has been working endlessly to ensure that we do have a symposium. So we do have a committee that is led by the very able Professor Masharia. Thanks to you and your committee. The committee has about, I think, 23 people from all departments. That is one collaborative effort. We can give a tick that has done a successful job and worked very well together. So thanks to Professor Masharia and the committee members for their contribution. Also appreciation to the logistics team. You can see Stephen here, Mary, and Daniel. So all the departments that have worked in logistics to ensure that we have all the resources that we need in order to make this a successful symposium. Last but not least, we have a big thank you for all who registered. You have participated actively, asked questions, listened. So a big thank you. I don't know what was the total number of registrants, probably Stephen would know. 170, that's really a good number. So thank you so much for anyone who registered, participated in one way or another. I think that is very good. So yes, with those few remarks, I would like, I guess, to hand over back to the chair. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everybody. A lot of appreciation to by the members of the organizing committee for this year's symposium. We are most thankful that albeit being pretty late in the evening after a long hard working day, that so many of you have braved that fatigue and you have managed to keep awake up to this time. You haven't taken your dinners, and you know, we again cannot express in words how appreciative we are, and the only thing we can do at the moment is to wish you the best in the forthcoming holidays, Xmas holidays, for those who celebrate Xmas, and may the others take that time to rest and to recover in preparation for the next year. So thanks everybody, those who presented, those who chaired, those who judged, those who worked on logistics, it has been appreciated. and we look forward to meeting you again next year, hopefully in person, not virtually, because of COVID you have been eliminated. Thank you. Enjoy yourselves and visit.